Hey folks, thanks for having me. This is great. I looked at the program and I think I'm the only non-technical speaker today, so that makes me your afternoon snack. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how it is as a large organization to go global. And I think you've heard a lot about Uber probably in the news, and I think there's a whole lot more to talk about. But I'm super excited sort of to take you through this. And I think it's a side of the story that you haven't seen before. And it gives a little bit of insight in our thinking process, as well as what we're trying to achieve. So my name is Thijs, and I've worked at Uber since 2014. I now lead a product team of about 25 people. It's actually based here in Amsterdam. And we do that because not everyone can or wants to live in the United States. So we settled down over here, and in 2014 we had about 10 people. And we grew to 30, 60, 100, hopefully by the end of the year about 150 people. So it's becoming a very sizable team. And we focus a lot on problems that are less apparent when you're in a US office, for example. So we focus on things that make more sense internationally, and one of those is payments related. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Now, it's a very fun bunch of people. So we have designers, mobile engineers, backend engineers, data scientists, researchers, and product managers like myself trying to figure out what we even should be working on. So let's actually start with a show of hands, because I'm just super curious. How many of you have used Uber ever? All right, pretty good. I think I see about half the room. We like our loyal customers. Thank you. And then I have another question, which is how many of you have a credit card? A little bit more, but not the full room. So that's interesting. We'll get back to that one. All right. So today is a story about an American company turning into a global organization. We started small, and we spread through many different cities, many different countries, which is something that Silicon Valley companies tend to do, and some do it a little bit differently than others. I think it's interesting to consider why so many of these companies want to go so global. So we start in 2008, actually, meet Travis and Garrett. So imagine you are in Paris, it's snowing, the bus doesn't run anymore, the metro is too far away, and you can't get a taxi because obviously everyone else has already taken those. So you're stuck. But you do have this incredible smartphone in your hand, and you're looking at it, and it gives you all these wonderful directions through Google Maps, but you can't actually get there. You can't get from where you are to where you want to be. So you can't find your ride, and that seemed just crazy to Garrett and Travis. So as that goes with frustrations, you go back home and you try to figure out, can we do something about it? And they did. So in 2010, they started in San Francisco. And with this goal of pull out your smartphone, press a button, and a ride shows up. Now, the San Francisco version that was launched was very much a limousine service. So you would have to be, you pay through the nose, basically, for that. But it is very cool. You step outside your house, and there's a car, and there's a chauffeur, and there's a suit, and brings you where you want to be, and it's easy. And as that continues, we expand. New York, Chicago, Paris, where everything began, becomes the fourth city, and it goes international really quick. This actually, by the way, is the first website. As you can see, it's called Uber Cab, and you can tell it's from 2008 because there's a BlackBerry on the website, which then was still a big thing, but unfortunately, we currently don't support BlackBerries anymore. So as we go into more and more cities, we start sort of rethinking our vision, our mission, the things that we want to achieve, and we hone in on this thing that we call on-demand transport for everyone, everywhere. We think that if we get that right, if we make it possible for you to get a ride everywhere you are, for everyone around the world, it makes it easier to go see your friends. It makes it easier to take that job that you otherwise wouldn't take. And hopefully, when you go out to a party and you have a drink, you get home safely because you're not driving yourself anymore. So we want to do this. We want to make sure that wherever you are, you can get that right. But it's not just for you. It's for packages, it's for food, it's for all these other things that need to be transported across the world and are now super inefficient processes, and therefore people don't use it. So as we start doing this and we go into more and more countries, we also start figuring out what are our unique selling points. What is it that makes us different from other services, or what makes us different from maybe a classic taxi? So we start putting those on the website. Now, this is the 2012 website. You can tell because it's black and very boxy. And it has six of these things, 6 of these points that we try to use to sell you our service. So we say it's a one-tap ride. You pull out your phone, tap that button, and you get a ride. We say it's reliable pickups because if you look at current options, it's quite frequently that you call them and that they don't actually show up. So that's something that we can deliver that others can't. We say it's clear pricing because we tell you up front how much it's going to cost, and that gives you that peace of mind. We allow you to split your fare. If you're with multiple people in the car and you're paying with your credit card, we go like, okay, you can ask your friend to also pay half of this trip because it's still a limousine and it's kind of expensive. And then we allow you to give feedback so drivers can improve their performance and their service. And then there's this last one, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. It's cashless. Now, this was a really big thing because taxis often, a decade ago, didn't accept cards. It would be too expensive, the machine would be broken, there would be all sorts of reasons for that. And once these Silicon Valley techies start building this app and this service, they go like, well, let's put in a credit card, let's use that to charge for this, and then everyone is going to be super happy. Now, that made a lot of sense while we were in the United States. Everyone in the US has a credit card. Everyone likes using their credit card. They get points and insurance, and the whole thing is amazing. But then we moved into other markets, and it really hit home for us once we decided to invest $1 billion in India. $1 billion is a large amount of money. It's an insane amount of money. And once you start doing that, you really need to think very carefully about what you spend that on and how you do it. So we start looking at that market, and we start figuring out what can we do. And we walk up to people and we go, this is this amazing service. We bring you from A to B, and this is going to fit perfectly in your life, and you just have to use your American credit card, and it's going to be great. And all these people in India would look at us and would go like, well, that's kind of a problem right there. I don't have a credit card. And that sounds obvious, but once you're coming from this very American context, and you always use your credit card everywhere, then that's a little bit of a shocker. But it's not just India. Actually, the World Bank in 2014 did this incredible survey, and they found that only 24% of people in the world had used a debit or credit card once that year at least. Just 24%. That means that the other 76% was predominantly using cash in the world. And that is very different from probably your experience, my experience of how you transact in the world. It's super interesting, of course, that you can see, over here, Norway and Sweden up in the 90s. Small markets, but still good. You got United States over here at a very good, 67%, a little bit lower than most people would expect, but still very, very decent. But then you drop Brazil right there in the middle, 42%. That's a steep drop already, but now, holy shit, you go to Mexico over here, 11%. 11%. And in these large countries, Nigeria, Indonesia, Pakistan, 1 or 2% of people actually have a card. These are cash-based economies. So if you want to provide on-demand transport for everyone everywhere, then a credit card is not going to cut it. So we looked at the data, but mostly we would actually go out and talk to people. And I think that is one of the things that I really wanted to get across here, is that if you are building something, if you're making something for someone else, there's nothing more powerful that you can do than actually go to them, sit down with them, talk to them, and ask them, what are you doing? What are your needs? Why are you behaving like this and not in this other way that I expected? Because it can be incredibly eye-opening. We do a lot of ride-alongs. We'll actually go and sit in the car with the driver while they're working. Or we would ask writers to meet us in their environment, and we'll sit down with them and we'll interview them. We'll have focus groups. But you can do this in all sorts of different ways. The most important thing is that you actually go talk to them, because if you're building something, you're usually building it with your experience and assumptions in mind. And for us, when we did that, that meant that everything was a credit card, but then it didn't work anymore when we went international. And for you, it might be something completely different, but I'm pretty sure that whatever you're building, you're using a lot of your assumptions in doing that. So I used to have a boss called Travis, and he would say that those who make magic are the ones that are seeing the future way before anyone else does. And that's sort of a big thing that he kept saying. I kind of disagree with that, so we're going to forget about that. To me, those who make magic are the ones who are actually listening, who are actually sitting down with their users and understanding very deeply what motivates them, why are they interested in doing something a certain way, how come they don't see maybe this more enlightened way that you are picturing, and what is that limitation that they find in their context. So listening super closely to our users has been incredibly powerful for us. So when we talk about magic, often the discussion internally would be something like this. It's if you don't have any transport, then absolutely no magic, and you're not reaching that magic line. And then taxi, okay, it gets you there, but we don't think it's great. And then if you would introduce cash, then if you remember, again, our original website, we would say it was cashless because we don't think it's that magical. So card is amazing. But I think this was a lot of this internal discussion. I think there's a lot of what happens in Western organizations where you focus on your experience and what you think is magic. But if you don't have a credit card, then magic is something that is completely different. It means that if we put the bar at requiring a credit card because we think that is a magical experience, it means that nobody gets that experience. Nobody is able to use that. That is the opposite of magic. So to us, that realization was a really powerful one. And we actually started doing cash. So what you're looking at is a driver app, which you might not have seen before in this fashion. And at the end of the trip, it's pretty simple, right? The driver app would tell you, or would tell the driver, hey, this trip is 3,000 in this case, and please ask the rider to pay it. Now, what's actually interesting about this screen is that we have a lot of illiterate drivers, people who can't really read or write. And when you're designing for that group of people, you need to think a lot about colors, about shapes, about icons, about consistency. And I think that's just a little tidbit on this one. It's like, I think what we found is that if you can make your product work as sort of predictable as possible, you can reach, again, more people. But now this brings us a lot closer to maybe what a taxi experience would have been, right? If you introduce cash on a product like Uber, you still run into the same problems where people might not be carrying enough cash to actually pay for it. So to solve for that, we actually introduced this feature for our drivers where they can tell us how much money they collected, and we would then take that problem on and we would discuss with our riders how to solve it. So I think that's like another point where once we've introduced something, we actually need to again go back and listen to our drivers, like, okay, what did this mean for you? What frustration are you encountering? We also speak to our riders, of course, and they had a totally other frustration, is that a driver wouldn't have enough change to give back. They would round it up. It was maybe a $9 trip, and now it became 10. So we introduced this feature where instead of the driver giving change back, we'd give it as credits on your account, and you could use it for a next trip. And that's something that people absolutely love. And then as you introduce cash in more of these markets, you run into other things like safety concerns. Some markets are totally fine. If you look at Indonesia or perhaps Kenya, for example, it just worked out of the box and it was great. And once we moved into markets where it was a little bit trickier and where maybe the crime rate was higher, think of some Latin American countries where there's a lot of drug trafficking, then you need to find other ways to make sure that you keep everyone on the platform safe. And for us, that meant that with a credit card, we can trace you back to a bank and a bank account, and we have a name, and it's going to be okay. And with cash, we need to find another way of doing that. So we ask people to connect their Facebook account, or to provide their tax identification number, or other sorts of information. And again, this is just making sure that everyone can use this service, but we want to keep it safe, and I want to make sure that everyone is happy about that. And there was another really, really big change that came with this, which had then, again, interesting consequences for the people using this. Usually with car trips on top, you see that riders pay Uber, and then Uber pays the driver. But with cash, we turned this around. With cash, the rider pays the driver, and then the driver pays Uber. But that does mean that the driver now is holding a lot of money, and that money at some point does need to get back to us again. So we built this whole thing where drivers can now drop money at convenience stores, and then it comes back to us, and everyone in the system gets paid. But working through all of those things required a lot of research, a lot of talking to people, a lot of consideration about how do we make something work, and how do we make it as magical and as easy and as smooth as possible. So all of that work was worth it, because it resulted in billions of trips across 60 different countries. And I think that is also the beauty of it. Once you start with something really small in 2015, and you just keep working away on how do I improve this? What is my next step? What is the next thing that I build? How can I make this even better? What is it that people need when they use it? You see that over time, it grows and grows and grows and grows, because people start liking it better and better. And it's never that you launch something and out of the box, it's perfect. You know, out of the box, things are going to be super small, and you're going to have tens of users, maybe. Maybe you're going to have 25, maybe you're going to have 100, and that's it. But that's beautiful, because you can actually start small, you can start testing. For us, here at the very beginning, the first month, we had 23 trips on cash, and that was super exciting to us. And then over here, we're talking about, more than a couple 100 million a month. So it's a completely different scale, but everything starts incredibly small. So I wanted to leave you with 3 takeaways, or recommendations. You can do with them what you like. First off, I would say listen to your customers, not your boss. And I think that can be a really tricky one, but it is well worth it. And the way that it has worked for us is you go out, you talk to these people who use your products, you try to understand what they're doing, and that is what you bring back, that is what you use to make decisions, not the assumptions that you already had. And the second one is to keep on moving, one foot after the other, and you'll get there. It starts small, but it builds. And as you make your product better and better, you have more and more people who start using it, and it's a self-reinforcing cycle. And the last one is focus on the impact, not the effort. I think that is probably the one thing that I'm seeing most at Silicon Valley companies. They will take on any problem of any size, as long as there's that belief that it can result in something incredibly large. And I think that is so empowering, so motivating, that if you just keep focusing on what is the biggest thing that I could be doing, and you just start chipping away at that, eventually you will get there. And eventually you build something that lots of people use and lots of people are super excited about. So I hope you will take that and use it. And thank you so much for your time.